Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in tonight for Richard French on a somber anniversary. 1 year ago today, COVID was officially declared a pandemic, and the shutdowns that have now become a part of our lives ever since began kicking in. The NBA halted a game right before tip-off, then later suspended their entire season. Today is also the anniversary of Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson announcing they had tested positive for COVID in Australia. What to do next, they asked. It was a question that frankly could have applied to all of us. The chaos and confusion of the moment reaching all the way to the stock market 1 year ago today, which plunged into a bear market, the Dow losing 1,400 points in just a single session. And that night, the President of the United States, then Donald Trump, spoke from the Oval Office.
This is the most aggressive and comprehensive effort to confront a foreign virus in modern history. I am confident that by counting and continuing to take these tough measures, we will significantly reduce the threat to our citizens, and we will ultimately and expeditiously defeat this virus.
Let's put his teleprompter reading aside for a moment. We will return to Donald Trump in a little bit as we look back on this deadly and utterly wasted year. But first, let's flash forward to today, day 50 of Joe Biden's presidency, and it's a historic day to boot.
This historic legislation is about rebuilding the backbone of this country and giving people in this nation, working people, middle-class folks, people who built the country, a fighting chance. That's what the essence of it is.
And with that, it became official. The nearly $2 trillion COVID relief package is now law. Signed, sealed, and delivered. $1,400 checks will start to go out to millions of Americans as early as this weekend. And a couple of hours from now, the president will deliver his first primetime address since taking office. He'll speak about the package he just signed into law, as well as the deadly pandemic, and when we can expect to get back to some sense of normalcy. Then the PR push will begin. Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris will tour the country to tout the benefits of the relief package, and they'll start in Atlanta next week and also visit several other battleground states. Biden says he's handling things differently than President Obama did after the 2009 Recovery Act was signed into law.
Barack was so modest, he didn't want to take, as he said, a victory lap. I kept saying, tell people what we did. So we don't have time. I'm not going to take a victory lap. And we paid a price for it, ironically, for that humility.
So President Biden is going on the road to sell his plan, even though a majority of Americans say they're already buying in. The latest poll numbers show that 3 in 4 Americans support the stimulus plan. That includes 90% of Democrats and more than half of all Republicans. The ink isn't even dry on the bill, and already businesses are reacting and benefiting. American and United Airlines just canceled plans to furlough 27,000 workers.
If you have one of those WARN Act notices we sent out in February, tear it up. There aren't going to be any furloughs at American Airlines in April.
27,000 jobs saved right off the bat. We're also learning new things about it as more and more analysis comes out. Out of a total price tag approaching $2 trillion, half of the stimulus money goes directly to helping individuals and families. That includes the checks, jobless benefits, tax credits, health care provisions, and other assistance. $500 billion goes towards helping local governments, and $65 billion is going to businesses. This law will also raise the income of tens of millions of Americans. And as you can see from this chart, people who earn the least are going to benefit the most. But don't forget the people in the middle of that chart. People in the middle class are also going to see sizable bumps in their paychecks. The only folks who really won't get much help out of this stimulus deal, people in the top income brackets. The Biden administration is also selling this plan as a major anti-poverty program on top of a COVID relief package, and they're doing so for good reason. It's expected to have a huge impact on the poverty rate, reducing it nearly 30%. And if it does, that would lift 12 million Americans out of poverty this year. And for Hispanic and Black Americans, the impact on the poverty rate will be a lot more significant than that. So how does the president sell this plan to the public to make sure of its success, both in reality and also in political terms? For that, let's bring in our first guest. Paul Glastris is a former speechwriter for President Bill Clinton. He's currently editor-in-chief of Washington Monthly magazine. Paul, today marks Joe Biden's 50th day as president. We know he's comfortable playing consoler-in-chief. We expect him to play that role again in tonight's primetime address. But with the relief bill passing, the focus has to turn to selling the package and making sure that voters know who provided all that help. How does President Biden do that?
Well, he has probably one of the most wonderful collection of materials for a speech that any president has had in memory, right? It's the 1-year anniversary of Donald Trump's speech to the nation from the Oval Office, which all the press will be comparing this to. And that's frankly a pretty low bar. He's got the COVID American relief package legislation, $1.9 trillion. And he has, day after day, it seems, more good news about vaccine rollouts and the amounts that are available and when people can get them. So he has an amazingly hopeful story to tell. And I think this is not just a sale of the bill, although it certainly is that. This is a moment for him to take stock of where the country is with this deadly pandemic and to try to validate how they feel, both their losses and their hope, and to be very particular in what he can tell folks about the help that's coming and the timetable of things getting better.
And all of that those are all fair points, but he does have to try to sell this bill. And since it aids individual Americans somewhat individually, you can't tour a vaccine site to sell that. You can't visit a business or a hospital. That sort of misses the point. So how does the president, what are the optics that he needs to reflect and amplify the stories of individual Americans who benefit from the bill? Like, for example, I've seen a lot of reporting today that a lot of parents had no idea that child tax credits were in that bill or that they'd be receiving financial benefits for them.
That is what a speech like this is. And, I wrote, had a hand in a couple of President Clinton's State of the Union addresses. And this is not that, but it's similar in the challenges. How do you explain sometimes complicated programs in ways that don't dumb it down, that are accurate, and that people without a lot of background in policy or in the systems of delivery can understand. So that's going to be a challenge, but people pay attention to these speeches. They're interested in the information, very interested.
We know that President Biden has been leaning on lessons from the Obama administration of feeling like the Obama team undersold the stimulus and Obamacare and were penalized by voters for both. He and Vice President Harris are going on tour next week, making visits around the country to try to sell the bill. We know that Donald Trump oversold everything, taking credits for vaccine advances, even putting his name on the stimulus checks and the letters. Biden seems to be looking for something in between. So how do you take credit and remind people where that credit should go while not being seen in a Trumpian me kind of light?
I don't think there's any chance or danger of Joe Biden, having the same style as Donald Trump. When in the Clinton White House, the speechwriters had a list, literally a list of the accomplishments of the administration. We were to, use those lists, those specifics in the speeches we gave. The fellow who kept the list was right across the hall from me, and the president would want to look at the list periodically, often, once a month, and would himself go in there in his left-handed script and change the language or add things that had been forgotten. This was not just Bill Clinton bragging. This was Bill Clinton having a keen sense that what the public needs from a president who they have given power to is reports about what he's doing with the power they handed them. This is like telling your boss what you've done for this week, or reporting to a board of directors. I do think the Barack Obama did not attend to that part of the presidency very well. I think the Biden folks know that. A lot of them were in the Clinton administration and noticed the difference. So this is well within what presidents normally do. And the key to not, instead of over promising and under delivering, I think the Biden White House has had a strategy of the opposite. They've been dampening down expectations and then beating them, right? It's called the expectations game. And so, the timetable about when things will open up, it keeps getting earlier and earlier. The amount of, when there are going to be sufficient quantities of the vaccine keeps coming closer and closer. So they're being careful with what they promise and then delivering. That's the key. You don't change the world with a speech, but a speech that is integrated with policy that works can be very, very powerful.
President Biden will not be the only one trying to claim credit for the stimulus. Roger Wicker, a Republican senator from Mississippi, tweeted out how helpful the stimulus will be for small restaurants. Small problem with that, Wicker voted against the bill. How should Democrats run against Republicans who voted no? Will those attempts to steal the credit work?
We'll see. They should try. If I were running for against a Republican who voted against this bill, I think it would be in every ad that I put up and every speech I gave. Why not? They had the chance to support the bill. They knew their voters wanted it. But they were worried that the minority of their voters who come into primaries would, would support a challenger. So they had to be more against the bill than they probably were. And that's terrible for them, I guess, but makes them vulnerable targets to attacks, and rightly so.
Finally, Paul, one of the few viable arguments I've heard from Republicans against the bill is that there's a ton in there that's not related to COVID. And Democrats during the debate pushed back on that. But now Democratic message seems to be shifting, as the Washington Post put it in a headline, from economic crisis rescue to poverty relief. It's now something of a social welfare bill. Any worries that Democrats are going to be seen as pulling a bait and switch? First it was all COVID, now COVID is just a part of it. And aren't they sort of playing into that Republican criticism?
The Republicans can always find an angle. This is a fine one. We'll see if it works. Let's be honest. Who has taken it on the chin in this pandemic the most? That's people with lower incomes, people of color. People who have to work in public, at restaurants, in warehouses, and so forth. The death toll from this virus is much higher the lower down you go. So the idea that this is merely, social welfare is a little rich. Moreover, major businesses got huge bailouts under Donald Trump. This kind of rights the scales because most of the money is not going to large corporations. It's being targeted at the communities that need the help. There are some longer term social welfare components to it. And Republicans are welcome to go after the refundable child care tax credits and say that the average family that is going to get these benefits because raising children is expensive doesn't deserve it. They should try that.
Paul Glastris is a former speechwriter for President Bill Clinton. He is now the editor-in-chief of Washington Monthly. Paul, really appreciate the insight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, we begin our coverage of the anniversary of the pandemic by showing you how every living former president except one is now trying to encourage people to get vaccinated. I'll leave it to you to guess which one isn't doing his part to help.